Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's email. I'm Katia. Again, I said email. I'm so sorry about that. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Katia Valley, Schools and Exams Marketing Manager, and I'm talking to you from Cambridge's office in São Paulo, Brazil. What about you? Where are you joining from? I see people already communicating in the chat from people from Brazil, Brasília, Ecuador. Wonderful. Guayaquil. Great to have you here. Please keep writing the place you are joining from. Bolivia. So many English teachers looking for professional development. Wonderful. This week, we are running a series of webinars. We are also recording all of them and uploading the recording in our YouTube channel, Cambridge, Brazil. If we move to the next slide, please, you will see a QR code on the left of your screen. It directs you to our Cambridge, Brazil YouTube channel for past mails, past webinars, and also a QR code on your right so that you have a link to the registration for future emails. I highly advise you to follow us on social media. We've been communicating all our updates and webinars there. Before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. We will have time to deal with questions, so we kindly ask you to send them in the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. By the end of the presentation, we will send you a link for feedback, and from the feedback form, you will find a link to download your certificate. Just reminding you again that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be uploaded on the Cambridge YouTube channel. Today, we have the honor and the privilege of having with us Andrzej Raczkowski, an experienced teacher and educational consultant. He has taken part in a number of diverse teacher training events and projects in Europe, Asia, and Middle East. He has an MA in Linguistics and CELTA, and his professional interests include assessment in ELT, educational management, curriculum design, online and mobile learning, and effective study skills. Good afternoon, Andrzej.
Hello.
Hello, thank you so much
show my
for
face
accepting
myself. Thank you very much for the introduction, Katia.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Andrzej.
Yes.
I hand over everyone. To you.
I've heard the geography, as you were calling out. The people were connecting and introducing themselves in the chat, and it sounds amazing to be able to talk to you across the ocean and to such a vast area and variety of backgrounds.
I'm amazed too. Even somebody from Italy is with us.
Interesting.
Have a good presentation.
Found out about this webinar.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I hand over to you. Have a good presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. I've simplified the title of my talk just to reflect what was announced and advertised to you. The working title of this presentation is usually Going Beyond Exam Preparation. So we're going to look today at how we can mix real life training and exam preparation in our classes. All right. So first we'll look at how we can connect to the interests and expectations of our learners. Then we'll look at life competencies, and we'll take a look at the framework of life competencies from Cambridge, and why and how it can be useful, and how you can possibly introduce it into your teaching, and also use some elements and training materials prepared for the framework in your own teaching. Then we'll look at how focused exam preparation can happen alongside training for life, and look at what's beyond language, because we usually in language classes we usually talk about either language training or exam preparation, but there's quite a lot beyond that, and we'll also look into that. And finally, I'll showcase a few digital resources that you may be aware of, but well, it's always good to remind people of what's in there for you, especially after summer, especially after holidays and back to school. All right, and throughout my talk, I'm going to refer to examples from this wonderful series, the second edition of Think. As you know, there are two different editions, the British one and the American one. So, how do we connect to the interests and expectations of our learners? The easier answer would be through global topics. Why global topics? Because they are of general interest to a lot of people in the world, a variety of backgrounds and a variety of cases that we can talk about. And there are universal topics, as we know, and they change from time to time. And we need to also be aware of what's important and what people are talking about these days. So, for example, this page, this one text from a course book of level 2, shows you and raises students' awareness of how people in the world have different eating habits, but some of these are healthier than others. And it also introduces the idea that we're going to switch to less popular foods at the moment, but well, in some parts of the world, they're part of someone's daily diet. And this is a fascinating topic to talk about, not just your eating habits and what food we consider healthy or unhealthy, but also how our attitudes to food and eating are changing over time, and how the current situation in the world makes us think that we need to find alternative sources of food for the future. So first of all, it's visually impactful, and secondly, the topic itself is fascinating. So I'm sure you'll find it easy to discuss it with your learners, and not just to read it for language learning purposes. And it'll probably lead to a lot of discussion. As you know, the teacher's book provides a lot of support for the teacher. So this is just a screenshot of the culture note from the teacher's book, which you find side by side with the text. And you can also talk about some interesting fun facts after reading this text, and introduce your learners to certain differences around the world. And there are some even fun statistics here that you may want to make your learners aware of. Another type of universal global topics is something related to our daily lives. We're people, first of all, and some of us are parents. And there's this current topic related to the use of social media in our daily lives. We post lots online about ourselves and others, but one of the trends, universal trends, is that parents choose either to post a lot of pictures of their children online, or some try to restrain from this and try not to post anything about their children and family. Just post about their interests, discuss topics online and so on. So the parents who post the pictures of their children online may not be aware of how that affects their children actually, right? So you see this text from level 4, which is already higher level, and it's quite well, learners are well trained, and their language skills are much better, so they can relate to the topic, and they can also discuss it more easily. And in this case, the question is whether to share it or not to share it. So you see the origin of the word is to share as a parent, right? There's this new concept of sharenting, all right? And the piece of advice that the text gives at the end, in very small print here, but you'll find it in the book if you like. It says, well, whatever you think, it seems that it's time to stop sharing things about your children, at about the age of 12 or 13, when they become teenagers, because they become oversensitive, and well, they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their friends. And as you know, friends become increasingly important in their lives. So after exposure to the idea of sharing thing, and well, discussing this as for and against, or as your own experience, have your parents ever shared a photo of you that you felt embarrassed of, or you didn't want them to share? Or what do you think of the idea itself? There can be a little discussion like this. And I'm sure that students have a lot to say about this, because, well, at least once in their lives, they have experienced that, and they probably felt quite ashamed of the experience of, well, no matter what parents shared, but most probably they thought this was not a sensitive topic or something very neutral, or even a happy event from the family life. But you know, pictures are pictures, and they stay online almost forever unless you hide or delete them. So you have to be sensitive to other people's pictures and what you post about them, all right? And then you can also have a follow-up discussion with your teenagers, and talk about other broader topics. For example, teenagers should always be supported by their parents. Well, how far they agree to this, and what they have to say about this. But to me, from this, the choice of the 4 options that you see, the more interesting one sounds teenagers should spend as much time as possible with their parents and family, because very often at this age in particular, they try to distance themselves from the family, even feel embarrassed to be with their family outside, afraid that their friends from school, they may see them together. And so there's this divide going on already at this age between the different generations, and it's an interesting topic to talk about. So you can start with something very familiar and something very personal, and go into safer topics, more general ones, but still be talking about teenagers' relationships and how they're related to their families, and what seems okay and what doesn't seem okay from their perspective. And then we can talk about other things like values, for example, how much of your time and how much of your attention you should pay to the family, and how much how much freedom you should also demand, even sometimes from your family, from your parents. All right, let's talk about life competencies now. So as you know, the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework has been around for a while, for well, probably 4 or 5 years now, as far as I'm aware of this. And it's a collection of life skills. As you see, the core life skills are on the wheel here, and they're usually the 4 C's, as we call them. And that's creative thinking, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. We very often refer to them as the 4 C's, but there are also other 2. The other 2 are learning to learn and social responsibilities, just as important for life as the 4 C's. But the interesting idea about the Cambridge Competence Framework here is that there are also 3 foundation layers. The foundation layers, good to know for teachers of any subject, not just the teachers of language, that discipline knowledge is among them. So we still have to teach what we have to teach. There's a lot to teach within the time frame that we spend with our learners at school. So the knowledge of the language itself, or we very often refer to this as grammar, vocabulary, and the 4 skills and the language skills. But these days, just as important as any other competency and piece of knowledge is digital literacy. So being able to use technology to your own benefit has become part of the essential competencies, and we are all aware of that, and we try to focus on our own professional development from this point, thinking that digital literacy is not just something that our learners need, but we also need them. And emotional development is another foundation layer in this framework. So the core competencies and the foundation layers comprise the framework. But the way the framework operates is not just a nice to look at wheel. It explains how each of the 6 competencies is then divided into the so-called core areas. So each of them has 3 core areas. And what's even most important and interesting to teachers of English here in this framework is that if you go still deeper into the framework, you'll find examples of behaviors that show and prove that the competency is developing. So if you go deeper into the framework, each of the competencies and then each of the core areas will then be divided into behaviors that will show what needs to be done in order to grow and develop a certain competency. And even further than that, teachers will find examples of language in use related to those behaviors. So what we say and not just what we do. So we start with a very general competency, we go into a core area of that competency, then we go into a behavior that reflects that competency, and then further on we find examples of language that can be used to talk about this. But we do talk a lot about competencies, but we need to also think about what it is. And the way the framework explains a competency, it's a combination of the 3 elements that you see here in this diagram. So it's a combination of knowledge, skill, and attitudes. Each of them on their own would not be or could not be called a competency, but a combination of the 3 makes a competency. So if you think about what knowledge is, it's not just something abstract that's out there, useful to know. From the point of view of a competency framework, knowledge is what you need to know in order to do something well. So knowledge enables you. When you know that something is useful to know because you're going to use that in your life later on and you can apply it, then it makes sense to learn something, to know something, as we say, right? then what's a skill? A skill is something that you can practice and get better and better at, so you can master and increase your fluency in using the competency through practicing your skill. So knowledge is something that is less tangible, but still you need it to support your learning. And skill is something that needs practice. And then attitudes are just as important, because it's the right mindset that you either have or you don't have, and you should have in order to develop a competency. So when you know something useful, when you practice your skills, and when you have the right kind of attitude, then this is what helps you develop a competency. The way competencies are developed in the course book that I'm talking about, that's an example from Think Second Edition Level 2. So there are pages dedicated to competencies in the book. And as you see, there's a variety of practice activities to go through if you want to practice a competency. In this case, the competency is achieving your goals. It's something which is very often part of your learning to learn. If you look at the framework, so you'll find achieving your goals in the learning to learn section there. So in this case, I'd like to invite you to think about this list, which is just a larger image of what you see on the screen as part of the page from the book. This is just a list of pieces of advice that we can give people who want to become better at achieving their goals. So these are just tips. And if you look at these tips, you can also find traces of knowledge, skills, and attitude in them. So for example, divide your main goal into smaller goals. That's a type of a skill, because you have to practice that. You break down bigger things into smaller things, bigger goals into smaller goals, and that needs practice. So that's an example of a skill. Something you need to know is, for example, expect some problems and be ready to solve them. But that's called a kind of combination of knowledge that you may encounter problems, you may run into problems sooner or later on your journey. But if you're ready to solve them, in other words, if you have the right attitude to problems, then you're going to be fine, right? So some of these are skills, some of these are pieces of advice as knowledge, and others are just attitudes. And we can also refocus our attention on these. So we can go through this list with our learners and say, this is not just 8 tips to help you achieve your goals. Some of these things need to be known. Some of these things have to be practiced on a daily basis. And some of these things are just the right mindset for achieving your goals. And then we can go on to discuss some ideas from this list, and learners have to make notes about how to achieve a certain goal. So this is just practice and further language practice as well. And then finally you arrive at a final list of tips, which are only 3 tips for achieving your goal. And this is something as a takeaway from this class. If you look at the page and the variety and number of activities, this will probably take you a whole class of about 40 to 45 minutes. I don't know how long teaching periods are in your country, but this is something that we usually have in Europe. It's 40 to 45 minutes per, as we call it, teaching hour, which is not full hour. All right. So that's quite a lot of attention, as you see, to a competency, but you can also practice a lot of language with it. It's combined. It's not just talking about achieving your goals, but also practicing a lot of useful language that comes with it. All right, and this example is from activity cards, and at the end of my talk, you'll see some links to the websites where you can find a lot of information about the competencies framework, but also downloadable resources. So there are separate booklets for each of the competency, and you can also download 3 sets of activity cards on that page, the competency framework page. And this is just one of them. As you see at the bottom here, it's labeled as teen. So this comes from a set of activity cards for teenagers. And just to prove my previous point that achieving your goals is part of the learning to learn competency, you see it's clearly labeled here. So you also know that this activity card is meant for this competency. Something that I'd like you to take away with you and then come back to at the end of my talk today is the little activity called fridge, suitcase, bin. The idea, the concept is very easy to use with learners of any age, actually. You have to ask your learners to think about why we use the 3 things, first of all, in our lives. So fridges are for storing, keeping something to use again later. So for storing something for a longer period of time. Suitcases are something that we usually carry with us, so we may want to use something in them soon or quite frequently. All right, and bins are for something that we don't want to use again or we want to avoid. So we just get rid of the things and put them in bins and throw them away. So the way the idea works, you can show the 3 pictures at the end of your class and say, all right, so what are the takeaways from today? Which of the things that you learned today would you like to put in the fridge for later use? You think it's useful, but not immediately useful. Then which of them would you put in the suitcase, which is something you may need again soon? And something that, well, we probably use today, but we're not going to use that again for some reason. It doesn't agree with me, you may say, or you don't find it useful, because we can't possibly say that everything that we expose learners to in a class is immediately useful or understood as useful by them. So they also have the option of putting something in the bin. If they find out that there's something useful in the bin, just like in real life, we sometimes take things out and put them back. So what's in the bin is not necessarily disposed of immediately. So let them just be in the bin for the time being, because the learners thought that this was not immediately or useful in the long run. Which is also a type of feedback for us. If we use this little activity at the end of a class, we know which of the things we've taught in this class are useful to our learners and which are not, or at least perceived not so useful by our learners. So we probably need to refocus on them. If we find them extremely important, then refocus on them, find other ways to present these to our learners next class, for example. So this is also a feedback activity for a teacher, not just encouraging the learner to take charge of their learning and take control of their learning and sort things out for themselves. All right, now exam practice. By saying focused exam practice, I mean here that we may focus on that on a page spread like this or a single page. And you know, those who are teaching with Think might know that you can find these pages, skill focused pages in the workbook. So in at different stages, in different levels, in different units, we may be focusing on one or another part of the actual exam that we help learners prepare for, alongside language training. Because, you know, when you're in school, it's not always about preparing for exams. You have to also feel the pleasure of learning and learn some things that are useful for you. But you know at the back of your mind that one day you'll have to sit an exam. So early exposure to formats of exam tasks is very useful, and you'll find that as part of the book. But this is not the only way to train learners for an exam. Another possibility is to, well, you know, writing is part of the exam, but sometimes your practice does not have to be so exam oriented in terms of format. You may just focus on a useful skill for the writing paper. So for example, here you find a for and against essay. So it teaches you step by step how to approach a for and against essay, how to structure it. So you see the paragraph structure, and then there's a bit of exposure to examples of each part, each paragraph, and then it's the learner's turn to actually practice writing that. So by scaffolding the activities this way, we're helping learners to actually achieve the result that otherwise they may not be able to do if we just ask them up front and say, well, could you write for an against essay? The usual answer would be, I don't think so. But when you've gone through a lot of stages on this page, you're more than ready to come up with your own little essay, for and against essay, for example, in this case. And what's also important is that you always have those writing tips by your side on the same page, helping you to just take away what's important and keep it for later on. So this might be something that you and your learners decide to put in a suitcase, or at least in the fridge, right? At the end of a learning session. But here's another possibility, and we have 4 different types of additional activities in the book, or in the main book, in the student's book, or in the workbook. And why are they there? We're building systems for the exam, because exams are not just about the 4 skills and the learner's ability to demonstrate them, but there's a lot of language that is involved. Language is just as essential. You know that in the old exams, there was a lot more focus on the language in the papers. And now the language is actually integrated into the skills parts of the exam. It's there. You cannot possibly do much without learning the language. The words and the structures must be there, so you can communicate with confidence. So in order to read, listen, speak, or write, you need words, phrases, and you need structures. But the way the book is organized is, you see at least 4 different types of support. So your learners are exposed to some learning skills also. If you look at this language reference page with about films and programs, you see that it's organized as a word web. And building a word web for yourself to expand your vocabulary is a very useful tool. So you have a combination of learning skills and some language input and extra language to help learners expand their vocabulary fast and in a very flexible way. They choose what to put into that web, but there's also something that can be given upfront. Later on, I'll show you an example of an empty web where learners have to fill in the words themselves. Another interesting thing is the sections that you find throughout the book called phrases for fluency. Well, no matter what the section is called, what's in it is most important here. So there could be an example like this one that you see at the bottom here, phrases for fluency. This one practices similar expressions, or you know that, well, we call them synonyms or similar expressions, and that expands learners' vocabulary very quickly. You know that if you think about how our brain works, then you know that our brain learns best when it can attach something new that we're trying to learn to something which is already there in our memory. So you just have to build a bridge between what's known and what needs to be known and what you want to learn. So activities like this, connecting old information to new information, and in this case, I haven't shown you the activity that comes before it, and it's just a dialogue with certain expressions underlined in it. What learners have to do is just go back to that dialogue, find those underlined expressions, and match them to their synonyms here, so to words and phrases with similar meanings. This way, we help their brains to absorb the information more quickly because they relate what's known to what's new, and that is better learned and for longer. Another type of activity that focuses on systems is, as you see, the word-wise section, which is in the middle here. And you know that there are words, usually verbs and nouns, that we call power words, because they can be words that have multiple meanings or multiple uses. So in this case, the focus on the verb get, let's say, and the combinations that you can make with this verb helps learners expand their vocabulary very quickly, because they know that just learning the word get on its own doesn't help you. You have to look at collocations and other possible combinations with the word get to actually increase your fluency and be able to express a lot more with less. So basically, they're all centered around the same concept of obtaining, getting something, but there's a variety of meanings that you can express using such phrases. And last but not least, here on the left, you see is get it right section with a little I, as we sometimes call it, which shows that the examples here are taken from the Cambridge English corpus. In this particular case, it's not just the general corpus that Cambridge owns and develops, it's the learner corpus. And if you're familiar with the learner corpus from Cambridge, then you know that it's a massive database of examples of learner language. So whenever a learner in any part of the world sits a Cambridge exam and they write something in the writing part of their papers, then this is copied word for word without changing the original language of the learner, and then it's put on a massive database when it's processed. So when the learner samples of language become part of the database, we can filter them in a variety of ways for, let's say, frequency, how often learners use this particular word, phrase, or structure at a particular level of the exam. So if we see that learners use them consistently and accurately, then we label them as something that is known and should be known at this level. So you know also that the labeling that is related to levels of proficiency and exams like A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, they also are related to the learner database. And as soon as a learner can use something accurately and consistently in their writing, this word or phrase or a structure ends up on the database. So we know what learners should know at each level, and we also know what common mistakes they make at each level. And these get it right sections focus exactly on the weak spots and the things that learners still need to improve at that level. And this is first-hand knowledge because it comes from real language data generated by real exam takers, by students themselves. And well, no matter how much time you spend preparing learners for the exam, thinking at looking at different sections and parts of the paper of a certain level, you still need to work on your language. So in the end, you'll always find, just like in any other course book, you'll find language and skills pages. So I just want to show you that alongside those we call, well, let's say traditional ways of introducing and practicing vocabulary and grammar, there are some interesting examples that are also things that learners like a lot, like grammar apps. So you can introduce a difficult rule through a rap, and then it becomes more memorable. It's something that learners can listen to and sing along with as many times as they want, but this is a fun way of remembering. And as you see, the other example here is the vocabulary extra page, where there's another word web, but learners this time have to fill it in by themselves, and this way practice their learning skills, but also expand their vocabulary and work on, in the first case here, work on similar words to learn to distinguish between two words that are easily confused, and in the second case, build their own web of words, phrases by topic. All right, so we've gone through exam preparation, we've gone through skills work, we've looked at the competency framework, and then I, at the very beginning, when I showed you the agenda for today, I promised something which is beyond language. So what do you think that is? Yeah, you may want to exchange a few ideas in the chat. I'll give you a few seconds to just collaborate in the chat and see what others type there. So what do you think is beyond language in a language class? The skills are there, the language is there, yeah, life skills are there, interesting topics and relevant topics are there. So what's left? What's left, and those who use the book already know, are values and thinking skills. And that is one of the unique features of this particular course, because there's alongside the things that everyone finds important these days, and you can find exam preparation and language training and and even life competencies in many modern course books these days. But this one in particular, and even in the first edition, when authors only came up with an idea for this book and how to organize this, they decided that values are just as important, especially for teenagers, because it's a teenage course. Thinking about values and talking about values is important. So you see here, the core value being practiced is preconceived ideas, and a good example of that is a film by Tim Burton, Edward Scissorhands. As you see, there's a little picture of Edward here, and when we judge something or someone at their face value, then we might have a lot of preconceived ideas and even misconceptions about them. We need to look at things closer in order to be able to form an opinion about them. So this particular page teaches learners to stop and think before you judge someone or something as something that you like, dislike, because these days it's especially easy to to switch into this liking and disliking mode because of the social media that we use all the time. And everyone seems to be collecting likes, and no one wants dislikes. So you don't have even an option of disliking some post. You can just show other emotions. You can be sad about some posts, you can care about them, but there's no dislike feature right there. So which also trains people to be more sensitive to other people's content that is posted online. So preconceived ideas, and just hand in hand with this, you find another thinking page where the focus is on thinking skills, and that's also a very unique feature of this course. There are regular inserts, there are regular pages related to training to think, and in this case, if you have preconceived ideas, you may also want to change your opinion if you think about something more critically, right? So as you see, if you look over here on the left, the two examples come from two different levels of the same book, but there will always be some correlation between some values and thinking skills in the book. So at an earlier stage, you may be looking at values, and at a later stage, you may be thinking about ways of thinking, but they are related to the same values. So you may have a very strong opinion about something earlier in your life, and later on, you may change it, as in this example. Yeah, if you think you have the world's most embarrassing parent, let's say here, then think twice and talk about this with your classmates, and maybe you'll change your mind even today during this activity. But this makes you think about how easy it is to label things, and how important it is to think critically about the world around you, but also about your ways of thinking and challenging your thinking. All right, we've got enough time to showcase some digital resources. Some of you may be aware of the book itself. Many of you are probably using it already. But what I find fascinating about this particular course is the digital resources that we have. So first of all, I'm going to show you a quick video introducing Cambridge One.
Hello, and welcome to this walkthrough of the Think 2nd Edition digital package on Cambridge One. Cambridge One, our home for digital learning, provides easy, multi-device access to all the digital teaching and learning materials for the course, all in one place. Age-appropriate experiences for different age groups ensure that learners feel engaged and challenged at the right level. Actionable data insights within Cambridge One enable you to track progress, measure success, and drive results. The Teacher's Digital Pack includes Presentation Plus, downloadable teachers' resources, Practice Extra, Collaboration Plus, Test Generator, and Test and Train exam practice. Presentation Plus is a classroom presentation software which allows you to display the student's book and workbook in class. It includes interactive versions of the activities as well as embedded audio and video. It also includes the teacher's book for easy class preparation. Presentation Plus can be used online or downloaded for offline use. Within Cambridge One, you can create classes, set assignments, and measure progress. The online teacher's resource area is filled with support for projects, graded grammar and vocabulary practice worksheets, writing templates, extra speaking activities, and more. It also includes the class audio and video. Download the teacher's resources to your desktop for ease of use. The Student's Digital Pack contains Practice Extra, which is packed with consolidation and extension activities for vocabulary, grammar and skills, along with games and rewards. It celebrates success, maps progress, and motivates learners. These bite-sized activities can be used in the classroom or as homework, and are perfect for learners to do on the go on their mobile phones. Learners can work together on digital projects online or in the classroom using Collaboration Plus, where teachers can set, track, and assess their work. Project work is broken down into different stages. Each stage has a number of achievable tasks, which take students step by step through the project. Students can collaborate on tasks by typing their ideas here. These appear in real time as a conversation thread. Teachers can also comment and encourage, as well as sharing learners' project work with the class in the showcase area.
All right, and I'll just switch to another slide because I want to talk about this in a little bit more detail. So you see the variety of the resources that you find on Cambridge One, and I particularly want to focus on exam preparation, on the test and train feature here. So you see it's arranged by level of the book, and that's also related to a certain level of a Cambridge exam. And you see skills practice for all the major skills. The speaking practice is also part of this, and here's just a screenshot of the listening activity that you will find there if you want to practice listening skills. And there's also a separate section where you can download handouts for speaking tasks, and they look exactly the same or are very similar in format to Cambridge exams at a certain level. So the idea that you have two handouts to download. One is the frame, as we call it in the Cambridge exams. This is what the examiner says, and the other is what learners are given as visual input for the speaking task. So you download and use this to practice the speaking part of the speaking paper and different parts of the speaking paper for a Cambridge exam. There's also something that you probably know, which is Test Generator. This is downloadable software. You download it onto your computer, install it, and then you use it. You launch it and use it on your computer to generate a variety of different tests that you can then later use in class with your learners. So you make your own tests with something which is pre-meditated, prefabricated for you. And in the resource area, you see there's a lot of extras that you may also find in the Teacher's Resource Bank. As promised in the beginning, you have two links here. One will lead you to the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework. If you just stop the video at this point when reviewing it later, if you want to find the links, and use those links to get examples of the framework, downloadable materials, and the activity cards. I showed you one of these with the fridge, the suitcase, and the bin. And there's also a separate link to Cambridge One for those who haven't used it before. All right. I think it's perfect timing. It's 5 minutes left.
Congratulations. Yes, thank you so much, Andrzej. We have a question from, in fact, we have two questions. One from Walter Antonio. He asks, please, what percentage of English classes need to be devoted to preparing our students with Cambridge exam formats?
Depends on your focus. If you're talking about this secondary school situation where the main purpose is language learning and not exam preparation, then there may be less focus on exam preparation. So the very essential bits of exam training that are already in there in the workbook, and I showed you some examples of papers from different parts of the exam at different levels. You may just expose your learners to the format and raise awareness if you don't think exam preparation is important. But you may also do that more regularly with the test and train feature that I showed you on Cambridge 1. So if you need to devote more time to language training, then just go along with what's in the book, use all the resources available to you, and expose learners to a bit of exam preparation materials to show them what's possible and what they can expect on an exam day if they ever decide to take an exam. If you are more in the situation where you have to train your learners for a certain level of a certain exam, then I would certainly take them online and use all the additional materials on Cambridge 1 for the different skills and prepare them for the exam. So there's no formula, but okay, if it's an exam preparation class, I would say you should still spend at least 60 to 70% of your time. I would, very safely say 75 by 25 is safe enough, because when learners think that you're only training them for the exam, they lose motivation. So they still need to enjoy the process and learn language on the go, learn language naturally. Encourage them to watch videos online on YouTube, on their favorite network, whatever they can get their hands on. But then when they come into a class, so if you have 3 to 4 classes a week, one class devoted to task formats and exam preparation is more than enough, I would say. Also because you have to keep learners motivated, because training all the time will just decrease their motivation.
Totally agree with you. Let me just place here the link for the feedback. All right, one more question, and I believe, Andrzej, it's related to the Think test generator. We don't have the person's name. Are the downloaded tests accurate to what the students can expect from the exams?
No, they are more on the learning side. They test what's in the book. So if you want to train them for exams, I'd rather use the Cambridge 1 online materials and whatever materials you can get, because even if you go to the major website by Cambridge, and you'll find sections for exam preparation, there's a lot of downloadables there that you can use to supplement what you already have in the book or online. So on the language assessment page for exams, you'll find a section for self-study for extra materials, and you can always integrate them into your teaching if you want some printed downloadable materials. But there are also games online that learners can use to prepare for exams. There's a lot of materials out there. So, but I would say the one stop for that would be the Cambridge website, and you have to go to the exams section of the website to find a lot more for each exam. But the test generator is mainly, it helps you generate tests for the materials that are in the book for checks and revision. Yeah, that's the main purpose of the generator.
Great, thanks for the advice, Andrzej. And Juan asks, at what point do you practice full mock exams?
Sorry, what was the beginning of the question again?
At what point
At what
you
point?
send mock tests to students?
Just before the exam, I would say, to help them feel better and less stressed and anxious on the day of the test. If you want a full mock test, all four papers in one session, and especially timed, if you're planning to use a timer to make sure that they also deal with the time frame of the exam successfully, then I would recommend that just before the exam, well, not on the same day, of course, but maybe a week or two before the exam, so they feel they've already done it. So the second attempt would always be more successful because they're emotionally and psychologically ready for the exam itself. They've already done it. If they haven't done it yet properly, then they can use practice tests to work on the skills where they probably lack speed, or they still think that they need to train, learn some skills, practice some skills better. Then they still have time. So it would be safe to say 2 to 4 weeks maximum before the real exam, if you want some remedy practice in between. But if you think they're ready to go and sit a real exam, then 2 or even 1 week before the exam would be good as an icebreaker, as something that will quiet their nerves.
Thank you so much, Andrzej. We ran out of time. Lots of positive comments here in the chat. We have placed the link for the certificate and the feedback. It has been recorded. We will upload the recording in Cambridge, Brazil YouTube channel. Thank you so much for this presentation and all the advice that you shared with us.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for the participation.